This is the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and joining me is Nissa Van Etten. We're your hosts for candid conversations about applied behavior analysis. No gimmicks, just real talk, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun. Hey everyone, would you like to get at CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. My name is Shannon Hill. I'm the editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute. And today we are bringing you an awesome group, starting with my co-host, Nissa. Nissa, would you like to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Nissa Van Etten. I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And we've been striving really hard to show you guys all of the amazing BCBAs who are working here with us, or at least the ones who are willing to come on and talk on camera. And I'm very happy to introduce you all to Celeste. Celeste, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do here, but also what your background as a BCBA was?
Hi, everyone. I'm Celeste. I'm a customer success lead here at CentralReach. So I like to say I like to help organizations optimize CentralReach, get it to its fullest potential for their organizational needs. In layman's terms, I say I get to talk about something I love with people every day. So my background actually started in animal training, all the behavioral principles. I was lucky enough to work with some marine mammals and train them in that world. And then I transitioned to ABA therapy, became a BT, grew in that company, was encouraged to get my BCBA, and I finally did, and I'm happy I did that. So, from there, I've just grown in my career from BT training manager. I was a clinical director for a while, and then I came here to CentralReach.
Yeah, and so our special guest here today is here to talk about upskilling RBTs, which is another reason that we invited Celeste. It's great to have someone who's worked through all of those different positions on this panel. But special guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Claire Ellis, and I'm currently sitting in the seat of National Director of Clinical Training and Development at Acorn Health. So a large organization that provides ABA therapy through the medical model. The majority of our clients do have autism here, and we've got about 75 centers across the eastern half of the United States. So we're in 7 states. And I'm a BCBA by training. I've been certified for a while. I've sat in, I think, all the seats. I was a BCBA, just clinical supervisor. I moved into a clinical director role. And then I moved into the director of clinical training and development. And as a clinical director, I know we're going to be talking about BT training today. And there is no greater gift as a clinical director than a highly trained direct care staff that can be versatile and nimble and work with the wide range of clients that we have. And so I feel like BT training is probably one of the greatest points of leverage that an organization has.
100%. And, you know, in our role here at CR Institute, that's the main thing that we're focused on is professional development. And of course, the development of those RBTs is probably the biggest part of that business. And so we get to meet and talk to a lot of amazing training directors. So that is how we ended up with Claire here today. We have firsthand experience of what kind of things you guys are doing and would love to be able to kind of dive in and get some best practices because we talk a lot about RBT retention and growing your RBTs into BCBAs, but here we clearly wanted to kind of focus in on the fact that not all RBTs want to become a BCBA. And so I'm hoping to kind of dive in on what else there is for career pathing in that direction. But before we begin, we like to start off with our question of the day, and Claire has chosen a good one. Let's talk about a book or an article, something that you go back to time and time again.
Yeah. So this is funny because if you work with me, there's probably like a handful of articles that I'm like, but have you read this yet? And the one that I think just today is so relevant is uh, the Wilder and Carr article on the performance diagnostic checklist for human services. And as someone in the clinical training and development role, that article is critical to understand because we are constantly kind of inundated with requests for more training. People need more training. They need more education. And that article, which I reference frequently, is like, maybe, but let's do kind of essentially an analysis of the performance deficit and see what else we can do to help support people. And so I would say it's not like a super, I don't know, sexy article that people are like, yes. But for me, I'm like, the PDC, let's talk about it. And then I think I know Tyra Sellers was one of the authors, and I wish I had the link for you guys right now to share it, but they wrote an article about how to use the PDC. So that's another one that I am frequently pushing out to. And sorry, Tyra Sellers, for not having that name of the article memorized, but I'm sure we can link it in the show notes.
We will definitely get that into the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, Celeste, what about you?
I think a book that has followed me throughout my career, from animal training to, direct therapy, BCBA, even at CentralReach here, is Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor. It was our manual at for marine mammal training in my department. And then it's in the Cooper book. She's in the Cooper book. I was very excited when I read that as I was getting my master's. And then even here at CentralReach, I feel like it's been mentioned and referred to. And, it's just, I don't always read it cover to cover, but I enjoy flipping back to it. It's the paperback smells great. And, and all my highlights and my old Post-it tabs and everything. And I think it's just a great resource to, generalize that shaping animals to kids, to adults, to organizations. So I think it's a good tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It does get kicked around at CentralReach a lot too. Carrie Milico, who used to be one of our co-hosts here, talks about that book a lot.
It's a good reminder to open that one back up again. They're long time.
Belongs on the shelf for sure to be brought down. Nissa, what you got?
Oh, I have two. One is the text by LeBlanc, Sellers, and Eli. It's the supervisor and mentor text that they published. I love that one. I mean, you can go back, and right now I'm on the interpersonal skills chapter, which is chapter 9, talking all about empathy and developing those interpersonal skill sets, which aligns with my second article that I refer to more frequently than most, which is the Taylor, LeBlanc, and Nosek article on compassionate care.
Yeah.
So those two are just my favorite references. I think that's the direction that we've seen the field shift. And I just love to refer back to the little, every time you read it, there's like a new nugget that you didn't pick up last time.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, so for me, we've given these recommendations a few times. And so I'm constantly trying to think, what else? And mine is less related to today's topic, I guess, but in a way. But it's something that I use personally as a diving off point. So around the turn of the century, a really long time ago, I started getting in a practical site, students of Kelly Wilson, who is a Reno guy, an RFT guy, and they were coming in with some words that I just did not know. Like, I've got to learn about all of this. And so the first article that I remember reading on the concept of experiential avoidance is Experiential Avoidance and Behavioral Disorders, a Functional Dimensional Approach to Diagnosis and Treatment. Yes, I did not memorize that, Claire. Have it pulled up on another screen. By Hayes, Wilson, Gifford, Follett, and Stroessel. So to me, the concept of experiential avoidance has been life changing, just grabbing onto that idea and seeing how much pain is accumulated throughout the course of life by systematically avoiding pain. That is such an interesting concept, which we know as behavior analysts, right? And but I think what the ACT community has given on top of our own behavior analytic approach to avoidance is some compassion Nissa.
Mhm.
And understanding that the person who is experiencing this avoidance slash anxiety, if we want to go there, um, gets some autonomy back in this approach. So I really like it, and I do find it useful whenever I'm talking with anyone. You develop that lens of what is it? What is this pushback that you're giving now? What is it that you're trying to avoid? Um, and I think it can kind of play in when we talk about supervision and management as well. So, ready to dive in? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, I guess I kind of want to just kick off with the original question about RBT career pathing. If I am an RBT and I have no interest in going back and getting a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, what else is there for me? I don't want to just stay doing the same thing for the rest of my career, probably.
Yeah, I think that's a a great question. I think frequently we see people fall in love with the science of behavior analysis, but maybe don't have the motivation to be a clinical supervisor in the way that a BCBA would, whether it's managing a caseload or all the writing that comes with that, I think is another, and the responsibility, I think too, for people, uh, doesn't always feel right. And I think that there's obviously a lot of avenues that someone can take from from an organizational perspective. And then it's going to depend on the organization that someone works in. But when we think about RBT pathing and things that potentially they'd be with their experience could be really, really good at, and things that I've seen before in the past is obviously there's always generally there's a lead RBT role, which maybe moves into more of a managerial role as a behavior technician, whether it's managing some of the operational needs, managing some of the
Mhm.
center-based needs, some risk management, maybe a culture carrier with that is as maybe a big part of their role. Training and development within the organization. That's one of the cool things that we see at Acorn. Again, we have many centers and we are frequently adding new team members. And the responsibility of training a new person to not only work at work at an organization, but also, hey, this is the science of behavior. So this is like a whole new framework in which you can now see the world. And we need you to do it this way because this is the way that we do it at Acorn. And also, this is your job. But we also work with a complex population. So you're going to apply it this way with this client, and this way with this client, and this way with this client. And we need people who are good at their job that can show people how also to be good at their job. So we at Acorn, while we have the lead RBT role, we have many people throughout the organization that are also trained to be trainers. And I think that that's a really great way to career path people for multiple reasons. One, it's like, hey, first of all, you've been selected because we want people to be like you because you're good at your job. And two, it gives people opportunity to practice leadership skills within the organization. And it's almost like an ancillary responsibility, not necessarily a job role, but it also can then say like, hey, this person's really excellent. We should be pathing them for a lead RBT role. So it's almost like a transitional piece, which is great. And it's really that's been really beneficial to kind of see who else can shine because the truth is usually you have one or two lead RBTs with a staff of 20, 25 RBTs. So there's not a ton of options. So I think that's been a really cool thing to see, just like giving some people an opportunity to shine in the training role. We also have seen RBTs move into recruitment roles, which I think is really cool
Yeah.
because they know the job. So I can honestly say, like, this is this is what's cool about the job. This is what's hard. This is why it's worth it. I've done it for years and I want other people to be fulfilled like I was. And come join us if you want, but you gotta want to because it's tough.
Yeah.
And so we've seen some really excellent career pathing for people at Acorn just moving into that recruitment role. So that's obviously not a BCBA role. We've seen RBTs who love the field, want people to access care, but maybe at this point in their life, they are unable to provide the level of energy needed to be a RBT all day long, or they still feel passionately about what we do, but maybe they aren't willing to continue to do direct care for 8 hours a day. It's an exhausting job. I can see why people are saying like, I love this and I want to support it, but maybe not be the person. So I've seen people move into like a scheduler role. So continuing to help people access care. They understand the way it works. The one-on-one service delivery model is tough for scheduling. I think everyone's going to resonate with that statement. One cancels, it's like domino effect, all of that. So we've moved people into scheduler roles. And then we've also seen people move into some outreach manager roles where, again, they can say firsthand, I delivered this care for years. I've seen how we can move the needle with families and children that we serve. And they can go tell people in the community about these services so people can access this care. So I think that there are many, and I'm probably missing some now, but there are many routes that people can go from the RBT kind of certification. But what I love about thinking about it is that the people in the role that have delivered the care, they are the ones that come in direct contact with behavior change most frequently. And they have that thick history of reinforcement and understand how powerful the science of what we do can be for people. And so putting them out there and advocating for people to receive services, I think that that's a great point of leverage.
There's a lot to unpack there. Let me do a secret word for our CEU seekers. The first secret word is advance, ADVANCE. All right. Before I dive in, Nissa, it looked like you were about to, so I'll let you.
I just had so many fantastic thoughts. One, that Acorn is providing that level of career pathing, right? In an organization where you might have brand new, just to the employment, to working in any industry, individuals who are just, either in undergrad or leaving undergrad or coming out of high school saying, I like kids. I want to understand what this is. And I've seen this in organizations I've worked at where I love this, but I just don't have the bandwidth, the funding, the resources to go back to school. And I think these individuals impact the field even further because they can still shape the next wave of individuals coming through, but they can speak to the field and what they've seen. I've seen roles also where they may be the ones answering the phone, talking to families, having that empathy to understand, let me just, script this intake to see if I need to pass you on to an intake coordinator or a clinical director. But they've had that role where they've been face-to-face with the learner, worked with the family. I love that Acorn does that at so many levels because it really does allow for people to, I've had people I work with, they come in, they start, and they can't at that time go back to school, but maybe 5, 6 years later when, if their children grow up or if they find other avenues, they just decide it's time. I've been doing this. I love it. I want to keep going. So I applaud you for what you're doing there.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see. Just the organizational growth in general has been really fun to watch. When I joined Acorn, we were in 3 states. We're in 7 now. So like watching the need for additional humans doing additional responsibilities just because of the size of the organization has been really incredible. But the other thing that is not direct career pathing that has been really helpful is building university partnerships too. And so recognizing that barrier to entry to become a BCBA is pretty expensive, not only from like a tuition standpoint, but also what has to be true when you're accruing your field work. So any ways that organizations can build partnerships with universities to potentially decrease that tuition costs is maybe not a direct like career pathing, but it's going to help more people access further education should they be interested in that.
Before I launch into my question, I'm going to clarify. This group is aware I'm having some internet weirdness, so I may have not heard it correctly. Did you use the phrase culture carrier? Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
A culture carrier? Yeah. So, to me, before, now I'm hearing my echo. Sorry. But to me, before putting anybody in front of a new hire, the first box that must be checked is like, Are they a culture carrier? Are they going to be someone who is going to show the new hire that this is what it looks like to be an employee here, which means that we show up in alignment with our core values? And so at Acorn, that's one of the first things that we talk about, even in orientation, is the core values of our organization. And this is what it looks like. And we've operationalized them. That was one of the first projects that we had, is like, what do these look like operationally? How does it show up on the day-to-day? And so what we do now is we essentially have a rubric and saying, like, does this person do these things? If the answer is yes, we can kind of put them in the bucket of like culture carrier. These are the people that we want to show others how to engage. Because at the end of the day, they are modeling, this is how we behave here. And so you want to make sure that you've got it on lock. And when you operationalize your core values, whatever they are for whatever organization, when you operationalize them, you can say they're doing it or they're not. And if they're not doing it, you can say, oh, but we need you to do this instead. And so that's such a key kind of point, but I could talk about that all day. So I hope I don't derail too much.
No, I mean, we love to derail around here. That I am so impressed, not only that you guys have that lined out, that you've operationalized it and assess it. That's tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. I'm curious about the process of that. Where did the core values come from? Who operationalized them?
Yeah. So this is what I know from like my recollection of the process. The core values were identified by the executive leadership team. At the time, the founder was Vicky Krobia, identified those. And then in our first leadership cohort, we had like a leadership training. It was called The Grove, I think, at that point. And it was basically clinical directors. As the organization was growing, they were broken up into 5 groups. Each was assigned a core value, and those teams operationalized them. And they've kind of like stuck around. It's evolved ever since. But that's kind of the process.
The ground up. I love that. I love that the people who were actually there doing the work every day had some involvement in doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Celeste, I haven't let you speak.
Well, I don't want to like talk over anybody, but yeah, Claire, I've loved everything you said, and Nissa too. A lot of what you said is, I have a similar perspective, like RBTs having a leveling program. I think that's great. That's something I've seen in my career path here, just in ABA therapy organizations, like having it laid out like a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and having that laid out even for when you're trying to recruit or anything like that, or when you're doing a Zoom interview or something, and having those benchmarkers so they know what their goals are. And another thought I had for career paths is like internal transitions. As a BT training manager in my role, like I hired within, right? They were all BTs. I was a BT that got promoted to my role. So that internal promotions, and from there, I think that what's great is then the employee or the BT, that they value the company. Maybe the BT role isn't for them, but they connect to that culture too. And, they're committed to the company. They appreciate their values. They're motivated. So I think that's really something that you can see if there's an internal transition. And I've seen it from all the roles within the company: intake coordinator, scheduler, recruiter, trainer. And do they want to stay in the role in the company? I mean, that's ideal, right? Because of all the turnover challenges we do have in this field. So that would be ideal. But I think a key role that BTs probably need to have with this job is they need to like to work with kids. I think that was always a tagline that I learned to use in some interviews. Like, you like to work with kids, because if the answer is no, then let's not talk. Yeah. But I think from there's that caregiving piece. You could go, working with kids, adults, geriatric field. Like, do you take that caregiving piece and carry that with you? Or what did you like about this job? Carry that with you to other roles. And there's so much to learn, as you said, Claire, with the science, the behavior principles.
you can carry a lot of that with you, how to interact with people. Um,
Well, I'm curious about preparing people for those future roles. So, how do we in different organizations, if we're doing it really well, prepare them not only for the next level of the more obvious tiering through the channels of ABA clinical work versus maybe one of these other types of roles?
Yeah, it's a big question. How do we prepare people for their next step in their career? And so I think taking this into consideration, like there's a lot of things that have to be true when you're preparing someone for their next step. But I think first and foremost, to create an organization that has the ability to provide feedback early and often to the direct care staff. So systems in place to provide frequent feedback, both from like your technical job duties and your professional behavior. So I think that's the first, if you were to say like, how do we prepare for the next step? I think first of all, like a culture of frequent feedback, people accepting it, causing behavior change, recognizing that. And then as far as like specific pathing for people, I know that someone had mentioned RBT leveling. This is a project that I know will be underway at Acorn in the near future. We don't have level 1, level 2, level 3 type roles for RBTs at this point. We have different jobs that people do, but we don't have like a specific career pathing. Like you're a level 1, now you're like, I think we'll get there. We haven't created that yet for a variety of reasons. And I think we're probably ready to move in that direction very, very soon. So I think that is another just like stepping stone that an organization can take. Like you must have this and this and this to move on to the next level. So I think that could be really helpful. I think what we're going to see, not just in ABA, but just in general, is the usage of AI to help career pathing, which I think will be very interesting. I've heard bits and pieces of how it's coming up. I know that there's organizations that's all they do is they have an AI program that they go in and they embed it into the framework of an organization. And that's how they help people move through their organization. So I think that'll be something that we'll see hopefully in the near future. Pretty cool usage of AI. But yeah, I think that's where I would start as far as specific career pathing. It's first and foremost a culture of feedback so people know what they're doing well and what to improve on. And then I'd love to see like a more structured, systematic leveling system for people so that it's very clear how they move forward.
Something little to touch on to that. As I think about different organizations that are out there in our field, we've got large orgs that can kind of provide this type of career pathing, right? As an RBT, you can really see your trajectory beyond having to go back to school and become a BCBA. And then we have small organizations where we really do just have the BCBA RBT model. And that's kind of the only space right now for you until we grow and have bandwidth. And I worked in an organization in the past where it was one clinic, 2 or 3 BCBAs and a team. And there was just, I think that we found it difficult to say, hey, I have a path for you beyond the RBT BCBA role because we have to hit specific numbers and metrics before we can consider moving you to an operational leader or allowing you to have, less direct facing time to spend more time doing administrative tasks. So I think there's business wise a component of understanding, your organization and the location that you're in. And if you're in a specific state where we know we're going to get a ton of clients and intakes and we can really plan in the next 6 months that a couple of our RBTs can move to the ops position because we've got other RBTs that could come in and clients that will fill that need. So I'm interested to hear, how Acorn went from 3 centers to 7. And I think a lot of listeners would be so interested because we've got a lot of BCBAs who are business owners. And we know that as BCBAs, we're not trained in managing businesses and how to work on that side of the business. And many of our colleagues have learned that skill set while managing their own companies. But I think it's a hard space to go from, okay, I've got 1 to 2. I do want to grow. I want to serve this region. I've got a couple friends there who are BCBAs. how do I get to that position? And then how do I, help career path some of these RBTs who also want to move with me?
Yeah, Claire, you got the answer to that?
Yeah.
It's a whole other podcast, I know.
A whole other can of worms, I think, to think about, but it goes back to having like a reasonable growth plan and ensuring that you're not putting the cart before the horse. I know a lot of people will start with in-home, build revenue, and then move into more of a clinic space based on like clientele and a footprint in the community. I'm not a business development expert by any means, but what I can see is that I've seen the movie over and over again. And if you were to say, Claire, what is your advice if I wanted to move markets? It's a community footprint, ensuring that families know that you can be a trusted advisor in this space and you're showing up truly for the humans involved, whether it be participating in presentations at the library or providing training to people in the community, like daycare workers, teachers, helping with like just the medical acumen of what we can do with ABA. That would be where I'd say you start. Ensure that you're a trusted advisor in the community in this space, and that people can count on you to show up for them and their faith. And so that's where I would start. But we can talk about that for a long time.
You're gonna have to come back 7 times. Let me do another secret word right now. The second secret word for CEU seekers is build, B-U-I-L-D, build. All right. So I guess one of the things I'd kind of like to delve into, and I want to just jump off of what Nissa said. What if we're in that position? Does that mean that there is nothing that we can do? Are there ways that we can help people develop skills? And I guess it's that back to that age-old question. How do you feel about developing skills in people because they want to develop them, but there is no place in your organization once they get that goal? I know that sometimes it's a gut check, right? Do we train people to leave us? What does that mean for retention?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think the first thing that comes up for me is that people want to do a good job. So no one joins this field or no one says yes to a helping profession. At least in my opinion, I actually believe this to my core and choose to believe this because of my job. No one says yes to this job and wants to half-ass it. These are, for the majority of us, these are children. And we are navigating some really hard times for them and setting the foundation for the rest of their life. And so one of the things that I think we try to do, at least at Acorn, and we have something called the Clinical Readiness Program that we'll probably talk a little bit about, just like our BT training program, is to say like, yes, this is a job, but there's also a responsibility that comes with this, and motivate people to understand how impactful they can be and kind of the heaviness of this role. And I want to just start with that framework because I choose to believe that everybody that comes through our doors wants to cause behavior change because they believe that they can make an impact on someone's life. Now, that's just how I am.
Yeah.
Okay. So if people want to make an impact, we have to give them the tools, knowledge to build their abilities to have a greater impact. And so I think that I choose to show up for every human that comes in as staff at Acorn. And we say we want them to be the best version of themselves because it impacts our clients' outcomes. And so part of me frequently is heartbroken when someone says, I'm electing to go somewhere else, or I'm electing to go down a different career path, or I'm electing to do something else. But for my own self and the way that we are training people, we like to go to sleep at night knowing that we did everything that we can to make them at least have the information available to be the best version of themselves, and cross our fingers and hope that through our leadership, through their training, through the other contingencies at play, they choose to do this work with us. But that's sometimes best that I can do from a national director of clinical training and development. I think the real leverage comes in the CD role of getting people to stay. But I'm not sure if that answered your question, Dr. Hill. Did I get there?
You're close. You're really, really close. Yeah. Sounds like you're saying yes. You train people. And if they go, then that's what's best for them. It's sad for us sometimes, but you train people, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a phrase that when I was a clinical director that someone said to me, and I will never forget it, is that everybody gets to pick. And so we get to pick how we show up for our staff, and they get to pick how they show up too. And so if we can create enough contingencies that people want to continue to pick, to show up in this way and continue to pour into themselves and be part of their own growth, like that's best case scenario. But we have to be proud of the way that we're choosing to show up too.
It's one of the providers of 40-hour training in large numbers. And we talk to a lot of organizations about their 40-hour training. One of the big issues is that that's a huge output of investment in someone that you don't know. Like, you're going to pay them for this 40 hours. And I'll go ahead and have a little soapbox here. The minimum number of hours is 40. That is what it's supposed to be 40 hours in my case of my voice in your learners. I apologize to all of you who've had to listen to me for 40 hours. But that is what to me, that's supposed to be a minimum. There's a lot of things that the BACB does not allow us to count, like any kind of application activities going out and trying these things out doesn't count. So that means that the majority of organizations out there, and we're even talking about very small companies, may be investing 80 hours, so 2 weeks into someone strictly on training before you ever even get an idea of whether they're going to pass that to get certified.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have lived and breathed the clinical readiness program at Acorn Health for the past 2 years. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what that is, if that's okay with you, just to give you. Okay. So the clinical readiness program is our direct care training program at Acorn. It's for BTs and RBTs. So there's a path for RBTs as well. The main difference between the BT training and the RBT training is access to Dr. Hill's 40-hour course. So we have essentially organized the 40-hour course into sections, and we're using, this isn't going to knock any BCBAs like off their chairs. We're using a programmatic approach to behavioral skills training. Well,
Say it again.
Well, like the way that the program is set up is you learn about it on CentralReach. You come to a live workshop with the T&D team. We talk about it, talk about how it's going to be applied in the day-to-day, why it's important to know this. Not only like, this is the information, but like, why is this of value to you? How are you going to use it? Then we go into the centers for something called a training overlap session. And then it's got training overlap sessions have 2 parts. One is a narrated observation. Okay, you learned about it. We talked about it. Let's go see it. Okay, and now let's practice it in the training overlap session. So we've broken it up into essentially 7 main sections of the coursework, and we repeat this process. And then there's competencies along the way that say, okay, you learned about it. We talked about it. You saw it. You practiced it. Show it.
Yeah.
Excellent. And the framework of the competencies is 1, to make sure that people are acquiring skills in a fast enough manner, and 2, to build confidence. Because when we did our kind of focus groups, when we were planning and building the CRP, we were like, what was it like starting out? And people were like, it was scary.
Yeah.
And so the competencies not only are like our checks and balances, like, are you acquiring skills, but also like, oh my gosh, look what you've learned. Look what you can do. And you did it with 2 kids that you just met. You've got it. Let's move on to the next section. And then by the time we get to that RBT initial competency, they've already practiced everything along the way. And so then they pass the competency and go on to take the RBT test. So,
Is there attrition along the way?
oh, yes. Yeah. I know that we talked a little bit about this. I naively thought this was going to be one of our silver bullets for getting people through training. But in all actuality, what the CRP has done is reminded me of the concept of healthy attrition.
Yeah.
So it goes back to like the framework of which I choose to believe to see the world. Like if you do this job, you have to want to make an impact and you have to really want to show up. It is not an easy job to be a behavior technician. And sometimes people say yes, but then when they get in the thick of it, they don't want to do it. And that's okay, because what we need is people that want to do this work, deeply want to do this. And so one of the first training overlap sessions that we have is literally called What is an RBT? And the framework of that training overlap session is to say, this is what your job is. This is the hard part. This is the level of support that you will be providing for people, inclusive of the stuff that maybe isn't palatable to most, toileting, feeding, challenging behavior. And then we end it with, this is why it's worth it. And so like the story of that. And there are many people that don't come back after that training overlap session. And we want them exited early on in the process rather than paying and investing in them for 3 weeks, which is about how long it takes for the clinical readiness program. And then them saying, oh yeah, actually, never mind.
Yeah.
Like we want them to self-select out early on in the process, which is why we have that very first training overlap session.
Do you tell them that?
Yeah.
You do?
We don't say like, hey, if you don't want to come back, don't come back. Like that's not how we look at it. But essentially, I mean, literally the theme of it is, what is an RBT?
Love it.
We start out and we say, this is what the job is. This is what it's going to look like. This is what your schedule is going to be like. From the morning to the afternoon, you're going to be doing this.
Yeah.
Look how many people are doing it and love it. And this is the job. And so we also try to do that in the interviews too, but it's just not the same.
You can't. And interviews are so hard. I love that healthy attrition, Claire.
Yeah.
That's a great way to phrase it. Because my background is like the BT training. It was mostly in home. So then how do you get that on the job training piece for in home, like clinic settings? It's what you just laid out as like what my dream goal was to build. I didn't get there, but you have great facets. You have the online, you have the on the job, you have the classroom. Multimodal is what I like to say, but the on the job piece is so important because they need to realize, like, I remember having a discussion with our HR and recruiting team, like, can we show them like a child tantruming in an interview just so that they're prepared? Like, and there's like, do we get somebody's kid to do that? Like, you can't use a client. Like, there's so many facets of that that's questionable. But like, I like your approach of like one of the first classes, like, this is what you're going to do. And let's do that up front. So then like, even to the point where like you've been with the client for a week, you've met the family, like, and then you leave a day later, that's a super big challenge. So it sounds like you guys have found a good way to try to approach that more quickly. So
yeah. And I think it's like, look at people's websites. Like that's like, if you look at any ABA provider's websites, basically it's like smiling kids cooperating, which is not usually what happens. It's in the CRP, the clinical readiness program, there's always going to be places where it can grow and get better and that kind of thing. But the first thing we focus on is trust, rapport, and connection with our client, which is not on the RBT task list.
Crisis intervention is.
Yep. But it is definitely, it's been interesting. So we came up with kind of like our own, we call them the clinical readiness standard. So we bucketed those different things: what technical skills, what professional skills, what play skills does someone need to. And so we basically operationalized them and then embedded it in the program. So
It was are all of those skills, are these things just strictly done in-house? Have you found any assessment tools that are useful, or are you just operationalizing and creating rubrics of your own?
yep, we operationalized them, created rubrics of our own, and we created our own. We based it on the same like structure as the RBT initial competency, but we have 3 competencies that people do. It's the foundations, then the applied, and then the RBT initial competency.
Okay. And those foundations, is that where you get into things like play skills and interaction skills?
That that's on the applied.
It's on the applied. Okay. It's interesting. We could do another whole episode there. So we really are going to need you 7 more
Yep.
times. I hope you're okay with it.
Well, I mean, it's only my identity. It's all happy too.
Um, all right. So our third secret word is face. 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 All right. And then as our last little bit, I would kind of like to focus in on building those non-technical skills, because many of the jobs that you're talking about are things that if they decide they're going to leave clinical work, it's still customer facing, a lot of what you're talking about. How are you guys tackling that so-called soft skill training?
Yeah. Human skill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, how are we training those? Well, feedback early and often is really critical. We have this is a hard question because it's a super dynamic skill set. But things that we train on that I think are just important to know from like a customer service perspective is even physically how to approach families, walking towards them, smiling upon entering, saying 2 things that were positive during the session, asking if people have questions, your body language, orienting towards people, and like even physically moving towards family and acknowledging everybody that comes in is like, these are just some basic stuff that will provide instruction for people. But I think probably everybody has some room to grow in training soft skills for behavior technicians. We have a professional skills checklist that once someone moves through the like clinical readiness program, that's what we have a clinical skills checklist, a professional skills checklist, feedback about how to engage with families, when to direct to a BCBA, how to direct to a BCBA, not just saying like, well, I don't know, or being dismissive. So we'll work on those skills. But I think the human skills, there's a lot of modeling that goes into play too. So in our selection of what we call our TOS hosts, that's part of like our rubric. Are they engaging in professional skills consistently? Are these the people that we want to model? In our training overlap sessions, one of the requirements for that is watching interactions with family. So watching them and talking about them after, like, this is why they said this. Did you notice their body language? Did you notice how they like, so just like pieces of that. But I do think, again, we are like, what you're tasked with in onboarding versus ongoing training is a lot for some of the people that are coming in. I know that I think it was Nissa who said, like, sometimes this is their first job. So it's like, okay, this is your first job. We're going to teach you how to see the world through this behavior analytic lens, work with this varying population. And this is what it's like to be an employee at Acorn, but also I need to level you up professionally. It's a big lift for people. And so I think kind of chipping away at what happens in the beginning, what must be true for someone to be clinically ready to work with a client. Okay. And then how are we going to path them moving forward? And so having things like a professional skills checklist, a clinical skills checklist, and then creating goals for each person based on those checklists. I think that's one of the best places to start.
I love that where they're when they're going into the observation, they have a list of things that they're supposed to be looking for. I think that's missing a lot of the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. So that's how we set up our we call them training overlap sessions. So the first part is we literally call it a narrated observation and their objectives. I'm going to explain to you what we're going to go see. We're going to go see it. I'm going to explain to you what we're going to go see, and we're going to go see it. And we're going to see it with multiple clients.
Mhm.
So like, and then the last hour is the practice. Okay, you saw it. Now let's practice it together. And so we have 7 training overlap sessions. They're about 90 minutes each in the program, and we're adding an 8. So it's pretty cool.
That's cool. I would love to come see it.
Is the practice piece clear? Is that with the client or with the trainer?
Yeah, so that's one thing too that I think has shifted. So historically, I think just in our field, a lot of times we're training while we're also providing 97153.
Right.
This program allows the host to be dedicated to the new hire or new hires.
Right.
So what we do, so like for example, man training, I think is one of the best kind of examples. It's just easy to say, okay, we're going to go see man training with someone who's using an AIC device, someone who's pointing, someone who's manding for information. So like the gamut of potentially what this could look like. We'll go see it with client A. We'll go see it with client B. We'll go see it with client C. We'll explain it. We'll come back. Okay, let's practice it together. All right, now let's go pull client B for 2 minutes to practice it with them. So we're not disrupting the client's session because that time belongs to them. But it's also a great opportunity for generalization if it's appropriate. And then you have the opportunity to expose your new hires to a wide range of clients and a wide range of application of the concepts.
And it's such a brief time period, then you don't have time for things to go really, really awry, right? And that client to be affected by that.
Yeah. And it's expensive.
I would say there's a large investment in that type of work where that you've got a staff member who's not client facing, and then a staff member in training who's also not client facing. But then you probably have to have someone who's scheduling the check-ins with each client, knowing this isn't client today. Here's who you can go see. Here's your schedule as a trainee. Here are the learners that are appropriate for these skill sets.
And
But
they're going to
also
be someone who's checked off as, yes, this is someone we want
the
to be a
culture
model.
carrier.
Yeah. Just the skill.
And then another piece is like you're not using the same client. Make sure you're rotating that client potentially. Like Claire, you mentioned it might be a few minutes. Maybe that's not as impactful. So you're not impacting that billable like learning time, right? But yeah, just also tracking who's there, the skills, like, and how do you do that? And how do you train however many clinics you have or or even for smaller businesses too, how do you track all of that?
Through Smartsheet.
Ask, is it all digital, all of the tracking per technicians?
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely complicated. It's a true program, and I mean, we can dig into the logistics of setting that up. But it is behavior change with hundreds of people in an organization. And so it's using things like the PDC. What's not going well? Where are we seeing breakdowns in the process? Where are we not seeing clients? What else do we need? And where we started and where we are now, it's just resource after resource being created. Integrity checklists for the supervisors, what to do if something goes wrong guides, how to get in there early and often with feedback, how to provide feedback, how to know when we say, this is we gave it a fair shake. These were your opportunities to acquire these skills and you're not meeting those skills. I'm going to release you back into the workforce to a job where you might be more successful. And how do you make sure that that is fair across the board? So a extreme programmatic approach that, again, sun up to sundown.
Yeah. Wow. I guess as closing, curious about what the BCBAs who are running all of this training or are benefiting from all the training, I guess. They have to be the models for these RBTs when they come out of all of this training. Is there another layer of training for them on how to maintain all of this?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. As far as the the same process, essentially, the onboarding of the whole thing could be recreated for the BCBA workforce.
Mm.
You create your standards, you create a training program, you check for competency, you have modeling, you have follow-up measurement over. And so like the whole framework could be repeated for BCBAs, which will be done at Acorn eventually. It's not currently, but it's about shared consciousness, having consistent resources for the BCBAs. So the materials are available on CentralReach Institute. We use CentralReach Institute actually as like, we have our training for implementers on CentralReach Institute, and all of the training post guides and the guided notes are on CentralReach Institute by design. You can only access the checklist on what you're supposed to be doing on the training overlap sessions through the training for that. So, which is something that we found out really early. We didn't want to hand out like the host guides without people accessing the training content. That's the only avenue in which you can get it. It's tied together.
Yeah.
So that's one way that we are holding people accountable. The other thing is that they have to pass the competencies. And so if you don't pass the competencies, my first question is how's the integrity of the rest of the program? All of this should have been practiced during the training overlap session. If it was, do we have a retention issue with our new hire, or is it a teaching issue? And so it's kind of woven in, embedded throughout the program to help hold everyone accountable to the integrity of the program, because we have these checks along, inclusive of ensuring that the BCBAs have access to all of the content and shared consciousness of what should be happening. And truly and fully, the most motivated people in our organization to get this training program off the ground were the BCBA, because you can't do this alone.
Yeah.
You have to have high quality behavior technicians, or it makes your life so much harder and it impacts our clients negatively. Back to that foundation of, we are only doing this work because we want to help and cause impact. So you have to have people that can help you have impact. So people are pretty motivated.
I think that's a mic drop moment, and probably that should be our last our last word today, because we're at our 1 hour. Claire, Celeste, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This has been a fabulous talk. I've learned a lot. And for those of you who are watching, you've got your secret words. Go get your CEU, and we'll be back next month with another episode. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Behavioral View.